Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Before we get started on our houseplant episode with Tylor from Arium Botanicals, I just want to give a shout out to Mossify, mossify.ca. They were kind enough to send me a shipment of their award-winning bendable moss poles, and they sent me various sizes, and I must say I'm very excited about them. As you know, if you have any climbing plants or any crazy growing houseplants, you need to control them, and there's not a lot of good poles on the market out there, but these are great because they have a nice weighted base. So you put it in the bottom of your pot, then you just fill in the pot with soil and plant your plant. But it's great because these poles are actually bendable. So if you want, say, your vine to grow a certain way, you could just bend it that way. And they also send you little pins to pin your plants in there. And I actually took one of their shorter poles and used it to pin my air plants on. So it's a good way to control your air plants. But they're really great products. I'm so happy they sent them to me. I'm having a lot of fun with them. So if you want to follow them, they're on Instagram at shop_Mossify. That's MOSSIFY. Enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and tonight we're going to talk about topic of, like a lot of people's favorite topic, is houseplants. So, there's people who garden and do all sorts of gardening, vegetable gardening and flower gardening. And there's people who are just obsessed with their houseplants. So I have someone I'm talking to tonight who I guess you could put in that category of obsessed so much that he actually owns his own houseplant nursery. So with me, and some of you may already follow him on his very popular Instagram feed, is Tylor Rogers of Arium Botanicals. So he's going to, go through, some of your favorite plants, Aroids and prayer plants, and what soil and how should we water and what's going on with this plant. But first, I want to introduce him. And as usual, I want to know his background and his journey and how the heck he got where he is today. So hi, Tylor. Thanks for joining me.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I would definitely throw myself into the mix of obsessed with houseplants.
Yeah, I didn't think you were going to find that insulting. I mean, if you're like...
Nope, not at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So one of our interns I've heard this term before, but we're giving him credit for it. Like a horticulturalist, someone who hoards houseplants and plants. So we thought that was cute.
That's a good one.
Yeah. As a horticulturalist, you're hoarding. I mean, hoarding's not so bad, especially if it's plants. So you are up in the Portland, Oregon area, and you have a very successful houseplant nursery, and it's very stylish. And I love the building because you have these, they look like the old garage roll-up doors. But tell me how you got into plants and how you decided to, make that leap and open up your own business.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely didn't follow a standard or a predictable journey to my career path. I was in college and I had switched my major probably like 6 or 7 times. I was seeing my guidance counselor like every other week, it seemed like. And it really, I had always kind of just casually enjoyed plants, and it really wasn't when I went away for college. I went to Indiana University down in Bloomington, Indiana, actually. And they had this most beautiful conservatory. And we had always driven past it. And I remember being in college, I was like, I have to go in there just from the look of it. It looked very, very much so what I've seen as far as photos of Kew Gardens, And I didn't even know that it was open to the public. And so I had always walked past it and never really seen anyone in there or anything. And so finally one day I was like, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to see even if I could just take a quick tour, even if it's not open, I'm going to try to talk to these people that work there,
Yeah.
And when I had walked in, it was open to the public all along. And so just my anxious self of building up, trying to get into this place. And from that moment when I walked in for the first time, that's when I something clicked and I was like, this is it. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Just that kind of a natural spark of curiosity.
I
of
love
seeing
that.
so many different things, you know, and like that sensation of like, oh, what is this? I need to know more, you know?
Well, I
And
think it's pretty funny that you spent like I could just see myself doing that, like writing out, okay, this is what I'm gonna say to get in. If they say no, then here's how I'm gonna say no. And all along they're like, yeah, you could go in. It's fine.
right, yeah, you could have been here this whole time.
Yeah. All you had to do was
And
ask.
exactly. And you know what? Once I went there, I was going like, I kid you not, sometimes like 5, 6 times a week. So much so that people that were just like visiting the place started asking me questions because they
Oh.
recognized me in there so much. I could not get enough because once you kind of like find a passion for, let's say, like tropical plants, right? You're looking in them. There's so many different like areas to kind of get into, or so many different like niche sections or species to get into, you know? And that's kind of where I really like found my spark. I was like, oh my gosh, I can grow these things indoors or in my apartment, you know, in my tiny dorm room at the time, even.
So then
And
did you change your major then? Or
so, yeah, I had, then I initially was going to school to go into the medical field.
Mm.
And finally, once I had worked up the courage to go into this, you know, conservatory, that's when I was like, I think kind of figured out what I wanted to do more, was just in the realm of houseplants or plants in general. And finally, I actually ended up dropping out of college my senior year, and I had moved back home to live back up northern Indiana, kind of close to Chicago. And that's why I was like, I really just want to like dedicate my time and my just like my energy towards houseplants, right?
yeah.
And I read because Indiana University actually didn't have a program kind of specifically geared towards botany or horticulture, and so that's when I made the decision to drop out. And I was like very anxious about dropping out, right? Because I was like, this is such a big thing to do. I was like, if I'm not going to pursue a actual degree in horticulture, I need to make sure I can at least have some type of like structure towards my learning, right? And so with that like extra time, I spent any and all time I could either going to different gardens, talking to different growers, like just visiting other like greenhouses and talking to them about their practices, but also like reading any and every houseplant book, reference guides, joining different like societies as well.
And this was, this was several years ago, probably before the huge houseplant craze. So I can imagine all
Yes.
the books you were finding on houseplants were from like the 70s. That's like
Very much so.
yeah,
Yes.
where all the pictures are faded. But I mean, some of the
Gosh, those are the
information
best books though.
aren't they though? I mean, I forget the pictures of the plants. It's what people were wearing, and then the furniture that I love. So that was great.
Yes.
Yeah, they're all smoking,
They
sitting there with their cigarettes, and yeah.
honestly, they were onto something though, because they had those like built-in planter boxes in those old school books. Like they knew what they were doing.
I know. Isn't that crazy that like I think it was like the Eichler houses and some of the 70s houses you walk in and it's a terrarium, and then back like, and
Yeah.
then in the
Yes.
90s and the 2000s people just ripped those out, and now people would die to have, those built-in,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the path that you knew. A college degree. I mean, I always say this, that if it wasn't for my internships, all the my jobs, really my degree. I hate to say this, didn't give me that hands-on practical knowledge of plants. It was all geared to going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
grad school for. I remember in my plant pathology class, everything was like, oh, when you're in grad school doing research in grad school, I'm like, that's not me. And my husband sort of had the same trajectory. He was in a PhD program and dropped out, and we bought a bike shop, so it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, sometimes when and I mean, it's working out really well. So how long, I mean, I can't imagine how long have you owned Arium, and how did, from that point
Yeah.
to now, how did that go?
Absolutely. So I started Arium when I was, oh goodness, I'm 26 now. I started Arium, I believe, in 2017, 2018. I should
Okay.
really know those dates better.
Yeah, it's probably
I
going
just
by
know
in a
that it
blur.
was,
Yeah. Yeah.
it very much so has. I want to say 2017, and I started actually out of my parents' extra studio back in Indiana. And I initially was just like, I want to start like sharing either like propagations or this like kind of unusual houseplants that I find growing collaboratively with other growers, or kind of like the odd things that I find in my travels, right? And so it was very much so like small scale. I was making terrariums for like local coffee shops and stuff in the area. And I had always wanted to move out to Portland. And so finally, my partner and I had moved out to Portland. 2018 is when we moved out. And our goal actually was to have, because we were just all online for like the first year, right? Just shipping things.
Got it.
And so when we moved out to Portland, our apartment was so small that we had no room to do any type of shipping out of our apartment. And so we were like, we got to find at least like another shoebox that we could ship out of, right? And we found a space. Our goal was actually within the first like 2 years or so to like, we'll put this project on hold. Hopefully in 2 years, we can revisit this and kind of start again. And we initially actually found a space within the first 2 months of moving to Portland. So things actually started very quickly once we finally made the jump to move here. And found that space. Yeah, in 2018 is when we got the space. And within 8 months, we actually found our permanent space, which is where we're at now. It is a like giant, it was an old auto body
with
repair shop.
Those roll-up doors.
Yes. That's one of my favorite things about the space, because come summertime, we roll those up. And so it's like we're working outside, and the plants love it as well.
Exactly.
It's really great.
Yeah, we always joke at the conservatory that we would love roll-up side doors at the conservatory because, in the winter we just need, a little bit of protection, but in the summertime those plants just need a little bit of shade. That's all. But if we could have roll-up doors to cool, that would be great. And you sort of have it there.
Yeah, it very much so feels. We like to think of our space now that we have as like this little, like, since Portland doesn't have a conservatory, like our own little like city conservatory, or little city escape.
There you go. Yeah, I like it. So I think I remember when you guys moved buildings.
Yes.
And yeah, because I think I saw that. So I'm like, oh, this is much better. And you guys get a lot of plants in. I mean, you must do a lot of, business, because you're constantly getting huge shipments in, and you are sourcing some. When I see some of the plants you get, I'm like, ooh, where did he find that? Ooh, that's nice. That's a good. So you must spend a good amount of time trying to source things that are, I know you want to give what the people want, and also people who are just starting out. So you have, some of the quote standard plants, but it seems like you also like to source, because you are a grower yourself. You have, and obviously as growers, we want to try the more rare and grow the more, usually when they're harder to find, it means they're rare, and they're rare for a reason. That usually means they're more difficult to grow. So do you spend, is that part of the fun, is trying to source, or is that sort of now at this point, you're just like, oh,
no, for sure.
Okay.
That kind of like initial like spark of like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this before, right? That feeling.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole reasoning behind Arium, was like, we want to share this feeling with people, or like that feeling of first walking into a conservatory, right? And being like, holy crap, how did I not know this existed?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the whole basis of the store, is like, when you walk in, we hear all the time of, oh my gosh, I didn't know this exists in Portland, and just to like walk in and have a full space filled with green, that you didn't even know you could grow that many things indoors.
Yeah, that is true. It's eye-opening for a lot of people. The name Arium, where did that come from?
Yeah, definitely. It's a play on terrarium, right? And so if you kind of break it down, it just means like a vessel or a space for something. And so like terrarium, a vessel for plants. And so we wanted to kind of play off of that, so it really could embody anything that we were hoping to get into at the time. So we were hoping for Arium to be this like vessel for people to pass through.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, because plants are. It's one thing to have a public conservatory, but anywhere you put plants, and anywhere where you set it up beautiful, people are gonna, come in, and that's the idea, is trying to inspire them to start growing themselves. So you have people who are been growing for years, but then you have the people who are just like, maybe I'll walk in here. And how could you not want to grow plants after seeing, them all beautiful and situated?
Definitely.
So now we're going to get into some of the, the questions. So I remember the most recent houseplant craze because I'm much older than you. I don't remember the one from the 70s. I will say that. And I know we're saying it's a houseplant craze, but I do believe it's here to stay. I believe it's because of
I agree.
the pandemic, or people just now, we've touched on with the internet, people are now able to, like you say, get so many different types of plants where, in the 70s, I imagine you went to the nursery and it was just like the 4 same plants. And once you got those and you're like, okay, that's it.
Right.
Here, it's almost endless with people propagating and cultivating and the internet. So I think it's always going to keep people coming back for more. But I do remember, I think this latest phase was that Pilea peperomoides, because it has those cute round leaves. And I remember seeing it and going, oh, that's interesting. And then the next, remember the Fiddle Leaf Fig. And people still love their Fiddle Leaf Figs, but I get so many darn questions.
They really do.
They do. And it really, what are your tips on growing it? Because I know I get so many questions about, leaf drop and the big blotches. And here we have really hard water. And I say, well, use bottled water. And they like to be pot bound. So don't give it too much water because you're just, killing it off. But how do you find growing them is best? What are some tips on that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I will say, out of ficus, I feel like Ficus lyrata, the Fiddle Leaf Fig, is the most temperamental out of the ficus genus that you can grow indoors.
Yeah, maybe we should then tell us some that are not. That I saw one you just got in at the nursery, but we'll try to get people steered in a different direction after we tell them.
Absolutely. Totally. I mean, I get the allure of it though, because it's really one of the indoor trees that has large foliage, right? So if you're looking for a tree, that's the obvious choice. Mm-hmm. But some of my favorite grow tips, kind of like what you had mentioned, is ficus, since they are temperamental, they really don't want to go through too much stress. And so once you kind of find one, they want to start to get acclimated. Ficus are going to appreciate nice, strong sunlight. So I always like to kind of give people the reference to, whether they're visiting or they're growing them, is lighting in your home conditions are going to be different for each person. Just as my growing recommendations, in Portland would be much different from someone growing in Texas, someone growing in Chicago, right? Because all these different environmental factors are going to be at play. But a good general rule of thumb is, with Fiddle Leaf Figs, definitely a few hours of direct sunlight is going to be best. Is going to keep that growth nice and compact, going to keep the more foliage on the plant as well. Specifically with Fiddle Leaf Figs, they will lose some of their leaves under stress, but also if they're not getting enough sunlight as well. Since they have such big leaves, right? If they're not getting enough light, they're going to basically acclimate to the amount of light that they're able to receive. So they're not photosynthesizing enough energy to sustain all of those leaves. Like you had mentioned. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and something I always like to tell people is, remember, in wintertime, it may be in a sunny spot in summer and getting that light, but the sun is so low in the winter that if you notice a drop in leaves or a change, it's because it's just, there's less of it. So you could have it in the south window and it's fine. I usually ask people, oh, when did you start noticing? Oh, in
Absolutely.
February towards the tail end. Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. Definitely. And just like how we all go through those types of seasonal changes as well, your plant is going to be feeling those same the lighting differences. And also too, specifically with Fiddle Leaf Figs, is temperatures. So they do not want to be by heating vents, air conditioning vents, because those temperature fluctuations is going to cause them those stressors. And that's going to be a sign of leaf drop, the leaf spots and things like that as well. And also keeping them slightly root bound. I've personally found that most ficus actually prefer to be a little bit more root bound versus swimming in a larger pot.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell people that that's okay for, ficus. They like it. They're like, "Well, wait a minute, we're told we're not." I'm like, "No, they really like it. Just don't look at it funny. Don't even talk to it. Don't move it." That's
Right.
and that goes with most ficus. Everyone knows the ficus
Yes.
benjamina. That one will just drop all of its leaves. And I tell people, don't move it around
Oh,
in the
yes.
spots. Don't move it. Don't move it. But not all of them. And yeah, I mean, I agree that the ficus elastica has large leaves too, and I think that one's a little bit easier to grow. But you posted the other day, I think it was the ficus alii. Was that
Yes, I
yeah
love that one.
yeah? And explain that one and how nice it is, and how not
Yeah,
temperamental it is.
definitely. I mean, that one is such a 180 in the foliage of
Mm-hmm.
for ficus, because you're going to have like very beautiful, like dark, elongated leaves versus kind of big, broad, ovate leaves. But alii is going to have a lot more leaves, so they, to me personally, make a much more dramatic statement because of like how full you can get of a plant. But care still is very similar, where they're going to appreciate a little bit stronger light. Otherwise, they will thin out and they'll be a little bit more sparse looking.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, yes, I agree. If you want to keep trying a ficus, follow the ficus lorotic, take these tips. But there's a point where it's like, well, I love how dramatic the fiddle leaf looks. Well, if something's constantly looking sickly, it's just not going to be
Right.
dramatic. Get something that's a little bit easier, and you're gonna be rewarded for your little less
Absolutely.
input in it. So yeah, that one I just knew that one. It's still a favorite. People still love it. I get it.
Yes.
Um, it makes a nice statement. And once you got it dialed in, it will be happy.
Absolutely.
But it's just
I would
finding
say
that.
too.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I would say too, for specifically like fiddle leaves, like once you kind of find that sweet spot, just kind of let it do its thing. I've personally found with Ficus lyrata that the less you kind of do for them, the better. And I'm not saying to like forget about it, right? But kind of let them figure out their own balance, and then you just like play with them versus trying to like make your plant fit your needs.
Well, it's like I want a tall plant in this corner. Well, a plant doesn't want to be in that corner that's tall. You need something that, maybe a ZZ plant.
Exactly.
But I want a tall plant in the corner. It's like, no, let the plant speak to you. But I used to tell people when I worked at a nursery years ago, someone literally came in 4 days in a row with, leaves off of this big giant vine. And finally I'm like, step away from your plants. Just step away. I don't want you to look at it for a week.
Yep.
I'm like, just ignore it.
Absolutely.
Know you're doing everything right, and then just ignore it. And yeah, and same thing goes, you were mentioning with the large leaves. When a plant has fewer but larger leaves, you're gonna see the death and decline of those leaves more
Definitely.
more on something that has smaller leaves. So I get the number one question I get is the Dracaena fragrans, the corn plant. Why the lower leaves?
Yes.
And I'm like, you just trim them off, but your plant, and I always like to say, well, as you age, you're gonna get gray hair and wrinkles too, and not look so good all the time. So
Absolutely.
give your plants a little bit of break. They're not, you're getting them sometimes from the growers where they are perfect. You have to realize there's definitely an adjustment period at your house as well. Do you tell customers that like this may have an adjustment period?
Oh, very much so. Exactly. Like you said, you made a great reference point. I like to tell people it's like losing hair. Like if your plant is losing some leaves, it's okay. If they're older leaves, that's just fine because they're still growing new ones, So it kind of balances itself out as the plant starts to age. But I always like to let people know that some of your houseplants might go through that acclimation phase or adjustment phase, getting into a new home, and that's totally okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you said. I figured you did.
Definitely. No, because I was going to say specifically going back to ficus for a second too. I was like, once a plant starts to get stressed, you don't want to stress it out even more by like, now I need to repot it or now I need to water it more, because that's going to only add like fuel to the fire.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's move on to Hoyas. I absolutely love Hoyas.
Yes.
I'm glad people are jumping onto it, and it's bizarre because they're not known for their, and I shouldn't say not known for their foliage. Some of them have beautiful foliage, but I fell in love with Hoya Bella when I was in college, when I was interning at the conservatory, and because to me it just looks like fake play jewelry. And I'm like, this is amazing. And then, some are really large. But people will get Hoyas and they'll keep them alive because they're really actually easy plants to keep alive and grow.
Absolutely.
But people will say, I can't get it to flower. So
Yes,
what are your
yes.
tips on getting a Hoya to flower?
Definitely. I always like to kind of think about like where this plant is going to be growing from, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're tropical succulents. And so I personally, for my Hoyas, I've gotten a lot of them to flower for me. And it is such a joy to have in a home, I would definitely recommend keeping them a little bit pot bound. They're actually going to be, I've noticed they like to be a little bit more snug once they've settled into a pot. I personally have a Hoya obovata that blooms for me every year, and I haven't changed its pot now for about 4 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And so keeping it a little bit more snug. I like to consistently fertilize, just lightly. I have I've read many different things about how Hoyas really don't need a lot of fertilizer, but I like to fertilize mine lightly every time I do water it, which is roughly around like 10 to 14 days. Sometimes I'll forget and it's like 14 plus days and it never really seems to mind.
Okay. Well, now that you brought up the fertilizer word, you have to tell us what you fertilize with, and you say lightly. That was lightly every 10 to 4. I mean, because when you tell people, oh, well, fertilizing is really, it's based on how often you do it and then your strength and what you use. So what's your go-to fertilizer for Hoyas, and do you use the same thing for all your plants or?
Yeah, absolutely. I use a mix. I bounce between 2 different types of fertilizer. I either use a NutriCoat, which is a 1868 NPK, or I will just use, so that one's going to be a slow release. So I only have to do so every 2 years, or I'm so sorry, redact that. I only have to do so twice a year.
Wow.
So it's 180-day slow release fertilizer, because I personally am not the person that's going to remember if I did it last week or 2 weeks ago, And so the only other method that I would do is lightly every time I water. And that's where I'm going to be using an all-purpose, like a 666, 888, anything that's going to be a very balanced fertilizer. But then I will cut that ratio, the recommended dosage for fertilizing. I'll cut that in half, sometimes even to a fourth, depending on the plant.
Got it. Okay. So that's in addition to the slow release.
No, sorry. That's
okay.
Okay.
No, that's okay. I thought, I mean, to me, that's still, if you were cutting it by a quarter, I was still just, giving a little bit extra. So, but that's instead depends on the plant.
Yes. So with certain plants, like with my Hoyas, I will water, or I'll fertilize those lightly every time I water. And that's going to be a little bit more of in the winter time, I'll go ahead and do so like a fourth strength. Whereas like spring, basically through the beginning of October, I'll go ahead and then do half strength every time I'm watering.
Okay. So they're in pots. So yes, if you have a potted plant, you do need to fertilize because they're not able to, of course, it's not like a forest or even a garden where you're getting, nutrients coming in. So that's good because people always ask the question, what do you fertilize with? So it's good to see that the slow release works for you for, I say lazy gardeners like me. And then some people, like you said, just can't remember and can't even remember to put it on the calendar. And then, if you dilute, you could fertilize a little bit more. But then, the container always says if you fertilize just once every. But what I really like you mentioned is that you reduced it in the winter. I think it's going back to where people need to know that even though plants are inside, they're still affected by the light, low light. You're probably going to have a little bit cooler, or it actually might be, drier.
Yeah,
but
drier for sure.
Drier because you run the heater. But either way, these plants, some of them are going to slow down their growth. And when you slow down your growth, you slow down the watering and you slow down the fertilizer. So it's not consistent the whole year necessarily. So I'm glad you pointed that out, that you do drop it down. And some people might be asking, why is he doing that?
Yeah, right. And if I was like really into growing like cacti or different types of succulents, if I was fertilizing year round, in that wintertime where there's not enough light, you're going to see a lot of them exfoliate or stretch out, searching for more light.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's another thing. If you're dropping leaves, your plants are going to stretch out a little bit. That's just they're looking for that light. So for your Hoyas, it sounds like you do fertilize them. You keep them pot
Hmm.
bound. You keep them in the
Yes,
sunniest spot in your, or do you?
absolutely.
Okay, and your
I,
sunniest spot
I,
is
I personally, so here in Portland, I only have a south window in my apartment, and I have not, knock on wood, have not burned any of them throwing them right in my south window. I hear a lot of talk about they only want like a little bit of dappled sun, or they want just bright and direct light. And from my personal experience, I have always found really great success with growing them with a few hours of direct sun, actually.
yeah. I definitely agree with you. I would get them to actually wear some of the foliage because I'm in a hotter area, but I'd still put them on
Yeah,
a
yeah,
south window where one or two leaves may get some, right up against the window may get some sunburn,
yeah, yeah.
but they would bloom. Or then I would move some of them
Right.
away, and that would be enough away from that south window, and it would still be enough. So yeah, it's good to hear because a light I think is what is required to get Hoyas to bloom. You could have a beautiful green plant, but
Definitely.
if it's not bright enough, it's not going to bloom for you. And that's what people want in the Hoyas for the most part.
Yeah. And the nice thing about Hoyas too is since they are so succulent, right? They'll tell
Hmm.
you they'll tell you if they're getting too much light versus like burning to a crisp if I were to throw like a fern right in my
Yeah.
south window.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And how often do you water? Because you were mentioning they're succulents, and they are, but they can't go. How often do you water your Hoyas?
Definitely. I have a few like different varieties. As the more into you get into Hoyas, right? You're going to see
Mhm.
all the different foliage types. So for things like a little bit more of the like more common varieties like Hoya obovata, Hoya carrii, things like that, I'll water roughly every, I would say like 10 to 14, which is going to be around that like week and a half mark.
Mhm.
Whereas things like Hoya serpens, right? Those tiny, cute, fuzzy leaves.
Yeah.
Um, I water that one a little bit more often just because it is going to be, has smaller leaves. They're going to be transpiring a little bit more. But also they just don't have the like water reserves that some of the larger leaves do.
Okay. I mean I like that too. Just look at the leaves. It's almost trying to tell you how much water
Yeah.
it takes. So
And,
yeah, I like.
and they'll tell you too, like the foliage gets a little wrinkly too if they're
Mhm.
too thirsty.
Yeah, but of course, sometimes overwatering will cause wrinkling too. So it's always.
Yes,
But I'm like,
yes.
someone's gonna know if they're overwatering. Well, I tell them when they get like a Phalaenopsis orchid, because it's so hard.
Right.
Wrinkled is overwatering, wrinkled is underwatering. I'll be like, you've overwatered it, and that's rot. If you've been watering it, like 2 times a week, then you're overwatering it.
Yes,
So. Yes. So you
absolutely.
should have an idea in your head. Oh, it's wrinkly. Oh, I forgot to water it. Yes, I better water it. Um,
Absolutely.
so we have to get to aroids.
My
Um,
favorite thing to talk about.
is it okay? Because you gave a talk. Where did you give a talk that I saw that you were giving back east somewhere?
Yeah. I had a
Yeah.
talk with Longwood Gardens last year.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
So
that was fun.
I have to admit, it's an ongoing joke at work about we have carnivorous students who absolutely love carnivorous plants. Then we have succulent people, and then there's aroid people. And I'm just
Right.
in the middle. I've never been able to latch on. I say it's my ADHD. It doesn't let me focus on any one type of plant. It's like all over the
For
place.
sure.
But and I love plants from all different areas. I find that beauty in everything. But people love their aroids, and it's it's I don't I to me it's a little bizarre, I must say. I get the
Yeah.
Monstera deliciosa, then you have the variegation. Um but yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I mean, beauty, everyone loves different things. It's so, but
Yeah.
as far as aroids, people do want some of these that are harder to find and a little more difficult to grow. So if someone wanted to
Definitely.
just get into aroids or isn't having success with some of them, what are some of the easier aroids to grow, and just some overall general growing tips for inside, like your soil and how do you know when to water it and the light for them?
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely get the appeal of growing aroids because I initially got into growing succulents. That was kind of my like
Ah,
first like draw of collections
okay.
actually. But then with Aroids, right, you're going to get a lot faster growth, and it's so fulfilling to kind of like see that you're getting the gratitude that you want of like, oh, I'm doing this right, I'm getting a new leaf, and I think with a lot of people getting into this hobby, it's easy to get sucked in because you can see, your work that you're putting into your plants like actually paying off.
Okay, I like that. I could see that. Yeah, because some of these succulents, you're just like, okay, any time now, you could do something.
Absolutely. I have one that's literally grown like an inch in 2 years, and
that's probably fast
people would
too.
not get the draw.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But for Aroids, there's definitely a lot of like harder to grow, but then there's also plenty and plenty of beautiful ones that you can grow very easily as well in a home setting. One of my personal favorites is Philodendron gloriosum. I can't talk about Aroids and not talk about that one.
I just posted a picture of its aerial roots the other day, so I will say, oh yeah, it has the nice red aerial roots.
Yes, very much so. But then those I love anything that has a good contrast to it. So a nice dark velvety leaf, then with a white veining that runs through it, will always have my draw.
Yeah, I mean, people have to point out sometimes the subtle beauties in the differences in the Aroid. So now you're saying, I'm like, oh, it is really pretty. It is really the velvety leaf. It is pretty. And that one is relatively easy, you would say, for someone who wants to get into Aroids.
Once it gets settled in, absolutely. That one I will say is unique because it's a terrestrial Aroid. Most Aroids are going to be like climbers, so they're going to want to find something in their natural habitat. Most likely they would be climbing up a tree. But this one specifically is going to be a terrestrial one, which is going to climb along that jungle floor. And so really, really, which maybe would be a great thing to jump into as well, is getting your soil mixture down.
Yeah,
once I got that down,
yeah.
Once I got that one down, my gloriosum has been absolutely carefree now. But specifically, if you wanted to touch on soils for a second,
I do for sure, because I mean soils are. I mean that was coming, but I was like, that's going to be a long. But yeah, jump in with the soils, because it's not one for it's not one type for every single. So if you could jump in talk about the soil for your Aroids, that would be great.
Yeah. For my Aroids specifically, I like to tailor them to your growing needs, right? Because I like to definitely hover over some of my philodendrons or Aroids. And so I'm going to need something that is well draining for sure. If you think about a lot of these natural habitats, yes, they're growing in the jungle floor, but the jungle floor is not made up of just soil, right? You're going to have a lot of leaf litter, debris, bark that's falling off trees, right? And so it's made up of actually a lot more than just quote unquote soil. And so I like to add a lot more to my soil that's going to be very aerated to allow for that roots to actually get some aeration through the soil, but then allow for a little bit faster drainage, right? Because tropical plants are native to predominantly more wet areas. Doesn't mean that the roots are always going to be saturated though. So I add lots of kiwi bark, perlite. I personally am a big fan of horticultural charcoal mixed into soils as well. I personally kind of stand by a mix of a 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 parts soil and then 1 part of every other additive that I would do, which is the kiwi bark, perlite, and horticultural charcoal.
Interesting. Okay. It's just so funny that we have so many different soil substrates at work. I mean, there's so many, but charcoal isn't one that we incorporate, but I could definitely see it, and I could see how it would work. So that's interesting. We're going to have to get some and play with it, but I could see, because it's basically just holding a lot of airspace, but it's porous. So it's holding some moisture, I imagine, and it doesn't break down. So you're having too much. So I like that. That's interesting. So a 3-to-1. So 3 parts soil. And what's your potting soil? Do you have it's not just all peat, right? I imagine your potting soil you're starting with is already a pretty good mixture of stuff.
Yeah. It's definitely a compost heavy soil.
Okay.
Versus just full peat or full because I'm personally not huge on a very peaty mix.
Yes.
So I like to go more of the compost route. and then adding those other additives to it for sure.
Okay. And kiwi bark and kiwi bark you probably get online. Do you sell it at the store?
Yeah. You can find kiwi bark most places, or most like I would say like orchid places as well will carry it.
Yeah.
You can also substitute for like orchid bark if you wanted.
Okay. Yeah, good quality orchid bark, because the stuff you usually buy
Definitely.
at most nurseries, not of course yours, is it falls apart easy and breaks down. But okay, and
Yes.
I love what you're talking about with the Aroids, because I get a lot of pictures of anthuriums, and for the most part, because people get them as gifts. Like it's sort of hard to explain that. Yes, these plants like moisture, but think of it being in the rainforest. It rains every day, so they want this water.
Yes.
Not necessarily they want you to water it every day, but they get frequent waters, but they don't want to be with their feet constantly wet. So you need something that's going to drain but hold a little bit of moisture, of course, because we're not watering it every day. So this mixture, do you use this mixture on just some of your Aroids, or is this like your go-to?
Yeah. So for most of my like standard ones, absolutely. So things that would be a little bit hardier, gloriosum, philodendron heteroecium, even more of like a philodendron lemon lime, right? That you can commonly find. It has like pink stems with the like nice bright orange, or bright yellow foliage. Those I would say would thrive in a standard mix for sure.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to try that at the conservatory whenever we transplant our Aroids again.
Yeah, right. We could definitely talk some fan service too as far as anthuriums go. It's predominantly now that I've been growing for a while, I predominantly grow more anthurium. So we can definitely get into that too. Anthurium moraquianum, I'm sure you probably get lots of questions or lots of like, have you seen this one before? Where can I find one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, people are looking for plants. As soon as you post it, like, I want one. Where can I get it? It's like, oh.
Right. Yeah. And I think that one's a great one too, to even talk about soil composition, because specifically Anthurium moraquianum is going to be native to areas that they are native to like mountainous areas, but they grow in slopes basically. So exactly like you said, where it's a rainforest, it's getting rain every day, but they're getting really fast drainage from growing on more of a slope setting. And so specifically with my moraquianum that I grow at home, I grow in, I actually water mine every other day, which is
wow.
Yeah, I know, right? Very touchy subject to get into, because once you start kind of like getting into more and more of it, you can really start tailoring your needs to how you want to grow your plants. And so I always like to kind of talk to people into researching where this plant is from, researching its natural habitat, which is like reading about its like weather cycles, reading about where you would find that plant, right? Is it going to be more of like a sunny outcrop or a sunny like outpost, or is it going to be deep in the forest, right, where it's like full heavy shade? Which has only led me to learn more about like how to grow plants exactly, right?
Yeah. No. When we get plants from the conservatory, the first thing we do if someone is, where is this plant from? Because that's going to tell you so much. And then you go, okay, this is the soil it needs, the light it needs. Let's try to mimic that as best as possible. So that's why I hate when nurseries, you get these nursery plants and it'll just say like assorted cactus. Or, I mean, nowadays you can, if you go to a reputable nursery, like I'm sure the names of the plants, even if you do get them. And, but if you go to like some of these box stores and you just buy this,
absolutely.
And people are going to be like, well, it's a cactus, so it must grow outside in full sun, and and they're like, oh no,
exactly.
or it's a succulent, so it must need no water all summer and want to be in full sun, and that's not always the case. So if you could find the name of the plant, you're actually way ahead of the curve, and then find out where it's from, and go from there.
Absolutely. We stand very strongly by that. Of,
good.
Like, really trying to educate about like its natural environment, but then also like knowing what your plant is going to be super helpful with you and you're like caring for as a houseplant.
Yeah. I can imagine people who work for you and or probably like everyone who's bought place. Okay, I got enough information. Okay, I'm leaving now. Stop talking about the plant. Just kidding.
Yeah, right.
It's like all plant people. You're like, oh, you want to talk plants? Okay, I could talk for hours about
for real. I definitely catch myself being like, I'm sorry, I've talked to you way too long about this one plant.
Well, I'm sure they're going to appreciate it. But going back, so do you have this plant in this anthurium in a different mixture because it's grown more as
Very
an
much so.
epiphyte versus a
Yes,
terrestrial?
yes,
Okay.
exactly. So I grow that one in a full mix of just kiwi bark, perlite, and horticultural charcoal. So actually no soil whatsoever. That being said, I do have to fertilize a little bit more too.
It's so funny because I'm like, he's going to say sphagnum moss. He's going to say nope, he didn't. He didn't say no sphagnum moss.
Threw you for a loop. Yeah, no moss actually.
Wow. Okay.
I got frustrated because I wasn't growing the plant how I wanted it to. And so then
Mm.
I was like, I'm going to fully switch up because I was actually previously growing it in moss.
Okay.
And it was fine. It was
Uh-huh.
fine, but it wasn't giving me the results that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, I'm going to read about this. Oh, you are from a very wet area. I'm going to start watering you more often. But the only way to do so is to make sure that you're getting
Yep.
incredible drainage.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if I was using my standard mix, right, watering every other day, that soil would be compacted and fully saturated 24/7, and it would
Yeah.
rot very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. We, and you're able to control that. And that's what I tell people is like the benefit of you having plants is you could control how much you water when you water. You know, at the conservatory, we have, you know, some anthuriums
Right.
in sphagnum moss because we have to err on them. Well, usually we err on the side of them being overwatered, but certain plants we do err on the side of them not being watered enough. And those are generally our hanging plants. So we do have a lot of
Yes,
sphagnum
yes.
because those ones then once, you know, they get so dried out, it's really hard to re-wet then the sphagnum moss. So we do use moss,
Yeah.
but in the back of my mind, I'm like, we should switch. Part of growing plants is always trying new things, and you know,
That's the best part about it.
Yeah, soils are so fun too. I don't think soils, no matter if you're gardening in the ground or in a pot, that's the
Yes.
fundamental basis of growing a plant is the soil, and it's not just a one trick pony. There's
Not at
so
all.
many within your aroids. You have already at least 2 different mixtures we're talking about, and I'm sure you have a lot more, but yeah,
Absolutely.
and it's just getting it through. You did the research of how the plant grows, exactly how, you know, it's growing in the
Yes.
wild, and then trying to mimic that with good quality, you know, materials.
Yeah.
So I love that. I mean, obviously that's where your whole like your research scientist part comes through. You can tell that you're like, this is where I'm experimenting with.
Yes.
But that's what, you know,
And
that's fun.
that's the biggest part about growing houseplants is there's no one right way to do so. It's a continual experiment.
Mm-hmm.
You can always like, well, let me try this way, see what my results are, you know, so then you can compare how it grew one way versus the other and see what fits best both for your space and your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some of the other, I guess, you know, I want to say easy houseplants, but what are some of the cool ones?
Yeah.
Cool ones out there that are now becoming a little more hip.
For sure. I will say philodendrons are still very, very popular.
Okay.
I ask quite often, I'll do some like polls on my social media of like, do you guys like growing like ripsalis or do you like growing philodendrons more? Which one? And always the answer is philodendrons.
Oh no, I love ripsalis.
I know.
Yeah, I've
I
seen
do
your
too,
right?
right?
Man.
So I feel like part of my work there is getting people to like just to inspire other people to like grow a full jungle versus just a like monoculture, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the philodendron pink princess. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker for pink, so I can't fault anyone for that one. And some of them are, you know, Monstera deliciosa is so rewarding to grow to the point where it could take over your house. So I guess like you said, it's the ones that are easy to grow, they're rewarding. People are like, look how much this has grown. And so, you know, that's direct, you know, it's direct pat on the back for people. And people want to see that because you want to see, you know, your rewards for your hard work. So that's interesting that philodendrons are still, okay. So philodendrons still in, ripsalis, not so much.
Have you, are you familiar with the species philodendron polypoidioides? It's a fun one to say.
Polypoidioides. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I will say that's the one that gets
thin-leafed?
always the most. Yes. I just shared that one not too long ago.
No. Yeah. Because isn't that funny? People love plants that don't look like what they're supposed to look like. You know, it looks like a
Exactly.
palm, but that's always intriguing. Okay, so that one I'm sure people just went gaga over.
Always.
Always,
Always,
yeah.
yes.
Okay. So that's I imagine that one's pretty rare.
Very much so. Yeah, I
Okay.
picked that one up from, if anyone's into Aroids, they're always going to know Enid of NSC Tropicals.
Okay. What is it again?
That's
As you can tell, I'm not in. I'm like, what is it again?
yeah. Who is that?
Yeah.
Enid from NSC Tropicals. She's a grower out of Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. But
All right.
I had picked that one up years ago because I was like, I need to have this one. And do you have it? And she had just like one extra plant. She's like, yeah, just try growing this one out. And it's funny now because I've grown this thing to be a beast now.
Yeah.
And I will say that one is always like the eye catcher whenever I share it.
So it's a beast now, but you haven't, I imagine you could take cuttings off of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I think the reason why that one is a little bit more common is because it is slower to propagate.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
What about Thai constellation? Is that one still like?
Yes.
Okay. It is.
Very much so is up there.
Okay. Got
It's
it.
a
People still
beautiful
want it.
plant too. Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure. I gotta keep my pulse on this, but I'm usually like, what? I can't keep track. What?
It changes very quickly all the time.
Yeah. And you need to stay up on it. I mean, well, one, you like the aroids, but two, you're in the midst of the business. So, okay,
Definitely.
I'll have to have you send me, okay, Marlene, this one's in right now. This one's in. This one's in.
We'll do our like weekly check-in.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to Calatheas, Marantas, and prayer plants. Absolutely.
Yes.
Some of them, you were nice enough to send me the Calathea Rosie. Was it the pink one? Yes. Oh my God. I absolutely love it.
I love that one.
Oh, it's so beautiful. I mean, it's just, I love gaudy flowers. So if you could have gaudy foliage, pink, I mean, I'm there.
Right.
But, sometimes, they're not the easiest. Easy to grow, but the biggest complaint is sometimes they get brown leaf tips.
Yes.
So tell us how, remember we're saying older leaves, they're going to show age. So you're going to have leaf burn on your older leaves. You have hard water.
Oh,
you're
yes.
over fertilizing, some of that. But what do you find works best to sort of mitigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So either distilled water. Portland is very, very lucky to have actually very nice water, so it's not hard water whatsoever. But but other places, right? Because even just outside of Portland Metro, your water is going to be much different. And so when people ask those questions, either using distilled water, I personally am not one that would buy distilled water just for my plants, right? So if you let your watering can sit out for 24 hours, you're going to dissolve a lot of those solids in your water. And so letting it sit out overnight, I would say, is going to be kind of the best thing that you can do in a pinch if you aren't going to, I guess, buy special water or use like RO water on your plants.
You don't have a pH of 8.5 and blew out a high system reverse osmosis. That's what I have at my house. My ppm on my well water is 800 and 900. So I am one of those people that will buy bottled distilled water because I have to, or rainwater.
Absolutely.
But we rarely get, we got some rain, but yeah, I'm jealous of your water quality, but
that really does set us up for Calatheas here.
Yes, it does. Exactly. You have good water, and you're probably like, what is she talking about? There's no problem. So
no, for real. I would say specifically with Calatheas, that would be one of its like biggest draws is its water quality.
Wow. So do you not even get brown tips on your Calatheas?
Very rarely, honestly. I would say more so, specifically in Portland, I would say brown tips are going to be more from lack of humidity versus your water quality.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, the humidity is something else I tell people, and it's really hard to control the humidity of inside your house.
Yes. It fluctuates so much.
Mm-hmm. I got a humidifier, but then I was getting a little bit of powdery mildew on some of my begonias.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it's like this balance of begonias with powdery mildews or Marantas with burnt leaf edges.
Marantas are happy.
Yeah,
now the begonias
exactly.
aren't
No,
happy.
can everyone just be happy at once? No, okay.
Right.
So what do you do for your humidity in your
Yeah.
house?
I actually run a humidifier 24/7 in my apartment.
Okay.
But with having higher humidity, right, I also have to increase my airflow. So I always like to say high humidity, high airflow is going to be key for them. Because exactly like you were mentioning, like if you have stagnant moisture, stagnant moist air, you can have lead to like fungal issues and things like that. So I keep my ceiling fan on for most parts of the day just to make sure that the air is moving while it's staying humid.
Got it. Okay, that's a good idea. If you have a ceiling fan in the room, keep it going. If not, just a little table fan, just enough to get that air
absolutely.
blowing. And air movement helps your plants anyways. It helps to build, stability on the stems. Also prevents
For sure.
bugs and pests and other diseases.
Definitely.
So so humidifier running 24/7, then your fan on running along with it, and that cuts back the burnt leaves on, and I'm sure that's helping all your plants, because these plants, house plants, we didn't even talk about the definition, but people think, oh, a house plant is like a house plant, but no, these are plants that are for the most part tropical. That's why we grow them inside and don't grow them outside. And when you go to the tropics, you see a lot of them, you're like, oh, that's that in my house. So they for the most part they like humidity. Do you have do you gauge your humidity, what it runs at?
Yeah, I do. I keep I think the humidifier that I have has a thing called like a humidistat.
Oh yeah.
So I can set it
fancy.
And be like, I want 70%. Right. I know it's definitely worth investing in if you're going to get serious about your.
Is it a
your
humidifier or is it actually a plant fogger plant?
It's
humidifier.
It's a humidifier.
Okay. All right. Okay. Because I at work we have the humidistat set to our big can't even basically things that make humidity. But at home, I just got a basic humidifier, and then I got a whole bunch of these really cheap different recordings where I just put them, and obviously closer to it's higher, and then the further you get away. But that's interesting that you got one with it. So what does it read about?
Well, I also have another reader as well.
Okay.
It's exactly like you said, just to test different areas. It's just a small, non-discrete one that I place, but I usually stick around 70%. And if it's definitely a little humid. So when friends come over, I'm like, we're getting the full jungle experience.
It's great for your skin. Just tell them it's great for your skin.
Exactly. But I even with that, seeing the readings, it still fluctuates, right? You can even tell if you're boiling water in an apartment, at least in a small space, or if you turn the heater on, you're going to see all these things that that make your humidity fluctuate throughout the day.
That's what I was wondering. You turn your heater on, and I imagine it just decreases the humidity.
Absolutely.
A lot. How does the water? Is this one you hand fill this, or is this connected to a water source?
It's great. It's a top fill, so you can either take a watering can right from the top and never have to really move it.
Oh, nice.
But it's detachable too because it holds I think 1.6 gallons.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
you're filling it all every day, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I fill it every day. There's multiple settings, and so sometimes even if I'm going to travel, I'll just turn it on low and drop the humidity down to 60%. But then at least it's 60% for a whole week versus 70 for one day and then 40 for the next.
Where do you think most houseplants would get in trouble with? I mean, down to below 40% humidity. Most people have less than that. I mean, most people run their houseplant. I mean, they don't use a humidifier, and then they run their heater. And I know our humidity here in summer is 20%. So inside it might be a little higher. I mean, it's super. I mean, it's just really dry. So I mean, I think that's a problem with a lot of plants is just the brown edges on a lot of plants is the low humidity. Then you're trying to grow ones like Calatheas, that are even more prone to, trouble with low humidity. So, really getting a humidifier is a good idea if you're going to grow plants. You'll be rewarded for what it does for your plants, so you're not as frustrated, I think.
You'll definitely see the difference in the ease of care, but also like how your plant looks over time as well.
Yeah, and then you want your plant to look good. You don't want it to look sickly. What soil do you grow the Calatheas in?
So a similar mix to what I was saying with my Airoids, with kind of like a 3-to-1, but actually it's not as coarse. So it's still like a standard compost, but then I'll add some perlite and then Kiwi bark. Definitely not as like chunky, because if it goes too dry, then you're going to see your Calatheas like having leaf curl, kind of folding in on themselves, because they're then now like too thirsty, right? So definitely something that holds a little bit more moisture, but still an organic media.
Okay, so when they curl inwards, they're not getting enough water. I just want to reiterate that, because that's what happens. Okay, all right, good to know, because that is
definitely
something people are like, oh, my leaf's curling inwards. That's a sign of low water for your Marantas. But having humidifier will help that as well, because it's getting a lot of ambient air. Okay.
And one question too that comes up with Maranta or Calathea is the new growth also comes in fully curled in, to not be mistaken with low watering or lower humidity as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, good point. Good point. And do your Calatheas, Marantas ever go dormant? Do you ever?
I actually personally have never had that happen.
Okay. All right. Just us.
Thankfully,
some of our Marantas go. It's not even like they go dormant. They have this like long, scraggly foliage. Some of them. I'm trying to remember which one. And then the new growth comes out the center. So I'll just cut the old stuff.
I was about to say it too, because I always tell people that they'll come in and they're stressed that they feel like they completely killed back their Calathea. And I always tell them, as long as there's still a root base on there, chop the foliage all the way back, and you can still get new growth popping from that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think sometimes they will go a little dormant if they're stressed, or completely dormant. But as long as you haven't rotted out the root system and stuff, then they'll come back.
Don't lose hope.
Yeah, exactly. But 6 months later, if that pot's still sitting there empty, it's like the picture you see of this. I'm sure you get pictures too. Someone sends you a picture of a completely dead plant, and they're like, "Is it still alive?" And then someone sends a picture of just like this one slightly brown blotch. It's my plant. Does it have any hope, or is it completely dead? It's like, wow, half full, half empty glass people.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's the people who are like, nope, there's still a chance it's coming back. So speaking of Marantas, Mealybugs and Thrips.
Yes.
So those
absolutely.
I would say Mealybugs, Thrips, and spider mites are the 3 most problematic pests on houseplants.
Absolutely.
What do you do for Mealybugs and Thrips?
For sure. Early identification is always very important when any type of houseplant, or any type of like houseplant pest, early detection. So really just spending a moment, if you're watering them, looking over the tops and the undersides of those leaves, just to like see anything first. Or if you're like, my plant is thriving for me, right? I water it once a week, the lighting is good, but I'm still getting yellowing leaves. Like, what's going on here? It's most likely a sign of distress, right? So then giving it a little bit further inspection, looking at the undersides of the leaves, is most likely going to tell you that you're dealing with spider mites or mealybugs, right? And so kind of staying on top of early detection. But once you do notice them, acting quickly, isolating the plant. But my personal favorite way of treating them is always going to be like manual removal of them. Yes, you can use sprays, you can use neem oil, like systemic or bonide products, right? Mm-hmm. But using those, but also fully wiping it away, grabbing a paper towel, a dishcloth, and just like wiping down each leaf, top and back, is going to be the most important thing to make sure you're, one, killing the adults, but also like any larvae that you might not even see, or very juvenile things that would go undetected to the eye.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that, because you're seeing the adults on most parts. You're not. They're with the adults are the nymphal stages, like thrips. You'll see the adults, but the nymphs are clear. You won't see the eggs. And then so you're like, well, I sprayed. And a lot of times the sprays are only going to work on the adults, because if you're using a soft spray, and then people are like, well, I did that and I still have them. Well, you got rid of the adults. It's just now you have the difference. So yeah, wiping off is just, we do that at the conservatory, or I use a hose blast at the conservatory. As usually like my first go-to, especially if it's not a huge outbreak and it's just an isolated plant.
Absolutely.
And what we do is we actually we use a lot of rubbing alcohol, and I use a lot of rubbing alcohol mixed to just desiccate them, and also it runs down into the nooks and crannies. But you want
Yes.
to be careful on the plant. I wouldn't do it on African violets. I wouldn't do it on very thin leaves or new leaves. But yeah, wiping off.
You bring up a great point there.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want to kill your plant because it is still, it's still a chemical. People are like, oh, I don't want to use chemical. Well, it's still a chemical. But the key is to just repeat it and monitor. And I love how you mentioned, oh, my leaf is turning yellow. Turn it over. We have an armored scale problem on our orchids, and they're never on the top of the orchids, but they cause yellowing, and that yellowing could look like a nutrient deficiency or a virus. You turn it over, and exactly where the yellow's at is where those stupid suckers are at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Spider mites, the same thing. They're a little harder to wipe off, but you have spider mites when you have that stupid cobwebbing.
Yes, that real thin webbing for sure.
Yeah. So after you wipe off, do you do then a spray, or do you just wipe off, go, okay, I'm going to monitor this and just keep doing this?
Yeah. I usually actually will follow up with a spray. I personally use Captain Jack's Dead Bug.
Okay.
But I've used a full mix of things while trying to kind of like tailor which one is going to work best for my plant. A lot of people still use neem oil. I think that still works great for a lot of them. But exactly like you said, like making sure you're saturating the plant when you spray the foliage, at least, so that it is getting into the nooks and crannies, things that you wouldn't normally see, or down into the growth point, so that it's killing that like the larval stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's where the bugs want to go. I mean, they're on the leaves, but they're going to also hide out places.
Yeah. And that new growth is usually the most tender, which is going to be the easiest to eat as well.
Yes. Yeah. It's the good stuff. Fungal gnats.
Yes.
I'm sure you get a lot of questions about fungal gnats.
Yes. I would say that's probably like the most common houseplant pest.
It? Okay. I can see that. I mean, I tell people that a lot of these plants, when you get them, they're in a heavy peat soil. And the first thing we do at the conservatory, and it sounds like you do, and it sounds like what you recommend to customers, is get it into a soil mixture that's going to be good for you and the plant.
Absolutely.
These plants are grown in peat moss because it's cheap. It holds moisture, and these plants are being moved about. But it's not a great permanent soil at all. And when you get it too wet, could be a heyday for any soil. Could be a heyday for fungal gnats, but especially peat.
Yes, because they love holding moisture, and that's exactly what fungus gnats want.
Yes. So what do you tell people besides transplanting them out of peat moss if they have it in their soil mix?
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
I do a few things actually. So fungus gnats are going to love that like extra moisture, high humidity, and mainly just the moisture of the soil is what they're going to be where they're going to thrive, and it's also where they're going to be laying their eggs, right? And so making sure that your soil is drying out for most of your plants, philodendron, aroids, they're all going to be just like a-okay if you let them dry out like 1 to 2 inches down between your next watering. Okay. So most people will say to let them like slightly dry out, and that's where it's going to be drying out enough to where it would kill any fungus gnats, either the adults or the larvae.
Okay, I like how you gave direct 2 inches down, because people like specifics. So,
yes, definitely.
And that's where the eggs are going to be. So if you let that dry out more, they thrive on moisture. So you're going to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the soil's drying out, then the eggs are going to be drying out.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And, in our growth chambers, researchers who are not plant growers, there's a plant called Arabidopsis, and it's like the lab rat of the plant world, and they all do research or whatever they're doing, but they don't want to come in and water, so they'll grow all this stuff in peat moss, and then they'll put them in trays of water, and then you open up this growth chamber it's completely sealed, and it's just fungal gnat city. So we're constantly trying to tell them, don't put them in water. Don't you let them dry out a bit. But
Right.
so we started putting like the sand on top, trying to act as a desiccant. So when the adults do, they don't go back in.
Absolutely.
And then sometimes you'll go in, you'll be like, put some sticky traps in. And oh boy, do some of the researchers really follow. And there's just like, it looks like the Nepal flags on top of Everest. It's just these rows of like sticky traps. And it does work. But the initial thing is get rid of the environment, the moisture that's causing them to thrive.
Absolutely.
Plus, they're going to kill their plants, and that's a whole different story. But there's, it could be a three-pronged approach to fungal gnats. But if you're
absolutely,
and they're a nuisance, but they're not the worst.
No,
they're not the worst.
Like I would much rather have fungus gnats than, let's say, like spider mites, right?
100%.
Fungus gnats.
100%. Yeah. You should put that one as a poll and we'll see what people say. And if you don't get 100% response that people want fungal gnats,
yeah, right.
Yeah. Give me those people's
You
number.
brought up a great point though. Yeah. I always will tell people too to like follow up of like sand on the top, rocks on the top, anything that's going to deter the actual like fungus gnats from laying their eggs in that first layer. That first layer is rock. They're not going to be able to get to the soil where they're going to want to be.
And that's what I tell people about cats. Cats who dig in your pots. I'm like, put something there they're not going to dig. Either large river rocks or broken terracotta shards or even chicken wire on top. If they can't dig in it, they're not going to dig in it. They're not going to be able.
That's the one draw.
Yeah. So yeah, I could do a whole episode on cats and plants. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
right?
I won't keep you. So what would you say are the top 5 easiest houseplants to grow for people who are starting out in the houseplant world? What do you think?
Definitely. I would definitely recommend Sansevieria. I would say is, I think, a great thing to kind of like start with, right? Because it's going to build your confidence in growing and your confidence in like, oh, I can keep this thing alive. I want to try another one now, right?
Yes.
It's like, because if you're discouraged right from the beginning, you grow a maiden hair fern, right? That are notoriously difficult to grow indoors. If you start with that, you're not going to be very encouraged to grow something else afterward if it doesn't end well.
Yeah, because Sansevieria requires low, but it could also take highlight.
Exactly.
Right?
They're super versatile. So you can grow them in like any spot in your home as long as you're getting natural light for sure.
And what would you grow that in? Because that's not it's not tropical. It's very much a succulent. So what is your go-to soil for something like that?
I would actually do, so we make our own tropical soil and our own cactus soil here at the nursery.
Good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
You're just so fed up with soils on the market. I get it.
Yes. We got like 2 specific. We were like, this is what we find best. Let's help other people learn about this too. And so I would do a half tropical, half cacti mix for my Sansevieria or my snake plants.
Okay.
Just because they in a home setting at least, they still want a little bit of moisture because you're not going to be watering them every week or every other week sometimes.
Yeah. Can I tell you a horrible story? Is our university chancellor, we were contacted to give them plants. And for their house. So the conservatory, Ernesto, my coworker, the manager there, we loaded up some plants and we're like, oh, in this corner right here, this beautiful, it was the trifasciata tall one, beautiful variegation. We're like, no brainer right here. Very, structural. We got an email from the person who takes care of the plants. It died. They killed it. I know. And it's like, we're like, we can't let anyone know the chancellor killed it. Sansevieria.
Right.
I just did. I just let everyone know right now. But still, we were like, what is going on? Because you can't really kill them unless, you try.
Yes.
So exactly. Sorry, I interrupted about your soil. So half tropical and half succulent mix.
Yes. So good airflow, still allowing to hold a little bit of moisture, but it's not going to be sitting and keeping those roots wet, which is going to lead to rot, which might have been the case, with that, with the chancellor.
It's possible. Yeah. I mean, our soil at the conservatory is definitely considered a succulent mix. And then for our succulents, we add even more pumice, but you could still kill it if you allow it to just sit in a tray of water constantly. So how often would you recommend someone waters a Sansevieria that's probably away from an east window?
Yeah, if it's pretty, like if it's only getting like full indirect light, no, never seeing the sky, never getting any like direct sun onto it, I usually tell people to wait until it's fully dry in between waterings, which sometimes can take up to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, feel the soil. If you feel any moisture, hold off. If you are in doubt of like, I think it was a few days ago when I watered it last, hold off. When in doubt, wait a little bit longer because they can recover from underwatering way better than they can recover from overwatering.
Exactly. Okay, so Sansevieria, what's another one? That's
definitely philodendrons, because it's a whole genus of things that you can really jump into. I wouldn't be doing my job right if I wasn't recommending philodendron.
Okay. So just, yes, there's a whole bunch of philodendrons out there that are relatively easy. We already gave the soil more.
Yes.
So really soil is key. You wouldn't recommend or would you recommend putting your philodendrons in right up against the south window, or would it be several feet away or an east window? What would be best for a philodendron?
Because like some people, at least here in a city, right? If I'm up on like the 6th floor of an apartment, it's most likely going to be unobstructed. Mm-hmm. But someone's 6th floor or someone's, south window on the 1st floor could have a tree right in front of it.
Yeah. Good point.
So definitely play around with your lighting. I would say for the most part, though, they don't want full sun, but they want a little bit of dappled sun. So like a morning sun would be ideal. So right in front of an east window, near a western window, but not full sun. Yeah, nice bright space.
I'm glad you mentioned that about the tree, because people will be like, oh, I have a south window. But then they send you a picture and they never open their blinds. You're like, are those blinds open?
Yes.
No, the blinds are never opened. And then, or there's a big giant shade tree. You're like, it's a south window, but. So I'm glad.
With north exposure.
Exactly. Okay, so philodendrons, number 2, number 3. And we're not necessarily in this order. These are just your top 5 easiest. No. Yes. Okay. Do you have
definitely
another one?
Definitely go for Hoyas. I love Hoyas.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any particular
they thrive
one?
in so many different conditions. Yeah. I personally really love Hoya obovata. Really beautiful, like round leaves, succulent, easy to grow, but also fairly available too.
See, you say that, and it's sort of a gaga one down here. I mean, yeah, people are like, oh, obovata. And no, it's not as easy to find down here. So people are going to have to go up to Portland to get it from.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'll send you one down.
I was going to say Hoya carnosa is pretty darn easy.
Oh yes.
See,
Hoya
look
carnosa
it's
sure.
So common you forgot about it.
No.
Or pubic calyx. Pubic calyx is another one that.
Yeah.
But some of the more difficult ones, like I have a Hoya, and I think it's the large leaf one.
Ladderbactiana.
Yeah,
yes.
it's not. It hasn't done anything for me. I'm.
That one's a slow grower for sure.
It's a very slow grower. Yeah, we just had a I can never pronounce anything. Maclari bloom, and that one's a really beautiful. And we're propagating that one. But the carnosa and Hoya puba, like I can't even say, pubic calyx bloom all the time.
Yes.
So, but then there's the variegated carnosa too, and that's really pretty.
I know it, right? Yeah. It's like once you start getting into like Hoyas or just like species in general, then there's so many different variants to them.
Yeah, and I mean the flowers are just I think it's nice because when the flowers do bloom, some of them are constant, but then when you get a bloom, it's a special. I always joke that oleanders are actually beautiful plants, but they're constantly in bloom, so everyone's like, an oleander, So
yeah, right?
Maybe if a Hoya was in bloom all the time, we'd be like, do you grow?
You got to make them work for it a bit.
Yes. Do you grow the Hoyas just in your succulent mix, or do you mix it and grow it like the Sansevieria, or is it completely different soil?
I actually do that one very similar to Sansevieria, where it's half tropical, half cacti, so they can get a little bit of both what they want.
Okay, that makes sense. And then we already discussed for the window, really bright to get them to bloom.
Oh yes.
And they're succulent, so lower water. Don't let all the leaves wrinkle, but if you start seeing a little bit of wrinkled leaves, maybe then water it like 2 days before. Keep track of it.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's 3 Hoyas. Okay. Next one.
Definitely. So Ceropegia. Ceropegia woodii,
Oh, yeah.
string of hearts
Okay.
commonly. I really love that one, but the whole genus of Ceropegia is so wildly fascinating.
I agree with
That
you.
is like any and all would be great recommendations to get into. And I think it's a very underrated one as a houseplant as well.
I think it is too. I think people are sometimes confused about where to grow it. That maybe is it a full succulent? Do I need, a warm greenhouse? Is it
Right.
tropical? Is it not going to be? Because you mentioned Ceropegia woodii, and that can actually grow a little bit outside here.
Oh, amazing.
A little bit, but protected. I'm just gonna say I don't know if that's. I mean, you must have dialed it in. So because you have got it dialed in, and you're saying it's an easy one, you got to explain what you're doing right here.
Yes, at least here I can speak for Portland at least.
Yeah, but it's inside, right? I mean, Portland, but inside your
Yes,
house. Yeah. So
fully
I
inside.
recommend growing
Yes.
it as a house plant, because outside it's like a lot of like, oh, better protect it here, move it out here.
Right, right.
So inside, how do you grow it?
Yeah, so I actually grow that very similarly to a Hoya.
Okay.
I have a few different Ceropegia species, but all of them I'm growing very similar to a Hoya here in Portland, I can say. I grow them very strong sunlight, a few hours of direct sun, because as you know, they'll sun stress really beautifully sometimes too.
Yep.
I'm looking at mine now, my variegated Ceropegia woodii, and in sun stress, it turns bright pink. It's beautiful.
Love it. Yeah,
I know you like your pink plants.
I do. So I'm going to stress my plants to make them beautiful. When I get stressed, goes quite the opposite. Like what happened to her?
Right.
I'm stressed.
Exactly. That one I found is another great one to grow as a houseplant because it is a little bit more reactive. Like I can go quite long in between waterings and the leaves will thin out as well. And so if I notice that the leaf is thin, knowing that I haven't recently watered it, giving it a nice heavy soaking to where it's like fully draining out of the drainage hole, right? Within the next like day or two, those leaves have become nice and plump again.
Okay.
So
you let the leaves
good
speak.
sun exposure.
Okay.
Yes. So I like to think as houseplants that you're forming a relationship with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. You get to know them.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to look for the subtle signs they're giving you. You want the subtle ones, not the major signs, because usually by then it's a little too late. So you grow it similar to Hoya, meaning really, the bright light, the same soil mix, that same one that you use for Sansevieria, which is half your tropical, half your. So I'm gonna have to ask what's in your succulent mix and what is it? Do you have it trademarked? Do you not want to give your secrets? Just roughly.
No, I'm happy to share always.
Just roughly, what is your succulent mix? So people, who aren't close to Portland.
Yeah. A little bit of organic media, a little bit.
Okay.
But definitely love using pumice. Definitely love using lava rock as well.
Okay.
We personally don't use any sand in our mix.
Okay.
I go a little bit heavier on pumice, perlite, lava rock, and then a little bit of compost.
Okay, so you have perlite in it. Okay, so
yeah, I do. I do a little bit in there.
Okay, all right. I mean, everyone's different, but it's incredibly low on organics, like a good succulent soil should be, because you're
very gritty. Yes,
what you're looking for is just that fast drainage with slight water holding capabilities. So, what is your tropical mix then?
For like. Just standard houseplants, or
is this what you mix? You said you mix in your for like your Sansevieria. You said you do 50-50, right? More.
Yeah. So then I would use that kind of standard tropical mix that I would do for Philodendrons, which is that like 3-to-1 ratio.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So it's still airy, but holds moisture, and then like mixing it in with a little bit of that like pumice and other things as well.
Okay, perfect. So that's your tropical mix we went into, and then this is your succulent mix. So, I like it. I approve.
Yeah, I got your seal of approval.
Yes, I mean, you're growing some plants really successfully. So, and I tell people, you do what works for you, but people need a starting point. And when you get a plant from a nursery and it's just in pure peat moss, you run into you're going to run into problems.
Absolutely. You're going to kill a few at the beginning, even like years into it. You'll still kill a few, and that's A-okay.
Oh yeah. That's number one. Yes. I'm like, we kill plants all the time at work. It's never our fault.
Right?
It's something else, but no.
All part of the experiment.
Exactly. That's how you learn. Okay, so that was Ceropegia. So the last one that you would
Yes,
recommend for
definitely.
starting out.
Yeah. Anthurium are having a big moment right now, but to start off, I would say, because I'm sure you're familiar as well, velvety Anthurium, people love them. I do too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to get into it, I would say start off with Anthurium clarinervium, a
Okay.
Mexican epiphytic
Mhm.
species, because it's very beautiful, but also it's one of the easiest that I've, at least in my experience, one of the easiest to grow as a velvety Anthurium.
Mhm.
So it'll give you that confidence to kind of branch out into new ones too.
Okay. Yeah, because you want to build, if you're starting off, don't invest in like a really expensive rare
No, no.
plant unless you know what you're doing.
I
You
like
know.
to think of it as like working out, right? If you jump into it and you spend 3 hours in the gym and you're hitting everything, you're not going to go back the next day because you're going to be fully sore.
Exactly. Yeah. Or if you're starting out running, don't, do like maybe an endurance 100-mile run. Not that you can, but
Exactly.
go don't sign up for one. Yeah. So it's all about learning. So good. I think that gives people like an idea of okay, where can I start? But so what are
Yes.
your I'll just ask you your top two favorite houseplants. What are your top two?
Oof.
I know it's like
Definitely.
asking you your favorite children. I know.
Right. Exactly. It changes all the time, but
I
I would say one that's like a constant is Anthurium clarinervium for sure.
Okay. All right.
It's such a great one, very hardy, but rewarding too,
Mhm.
just to see those leaves. And then, like I said, it's always changing, but between all the other different types of Anthurium, Philodendron gloriosum is a great one. At least today, it's putting out a new leaf. I'm looking at it right now, so that definitely has my attention.
It's like you're doing something for me. Thank you. Thank you, plant. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So what do you see coming up? Do you guys have anything in the pipe works for Arium? I know you do installations up there for buildings and you
Yeah,
post
yeah.
those. So anything upcoming, any major changes, anything you could tell us, or is everything still top secret? Or
Oh, for sure. No. One thing that I'm very excited to start like kind of doing more projects like this and just kind of exploring this idea as well is doing installations that are going to be kind of site specific, right?
Mhm.
So I'm Peruvian. We recently did an installation for a Peruvian restaurant here in Portland.
Ah,
And I really like passed that idea. They're on board too. And so it's a kind of an ongoing project that we're always adding to.
yeah.
Excuse me, but doing more like an emphasis on Peruvian species. So we're like, oh, we're going to try and find these like cacti that are going to be native to the Andes, right? And trying to do very site specific installations versus a whole mix of houseplants. Let's try and recreate little different scenes of ecosystems.
I love that. I love that. One, because it's so fun because it forces you to start sourcing interesting
Yes.
plants, but it also really helps you focus on um, looking at the plants from a certain area. I mean, we do that at the conservatory. That's part of what, we do as far as, where we have our plants and how we have to have, we have the epiphyte walls students use, and then we
Right.
have the shade dioramas. But to be able to do that and make it look nice too. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
difficult and not want to reach for like, God, I know this will grow in that spot and it'll look so great. Cause I mean, it's easy to say yes. And I'm trying to think in my mind, Peruvian plants that will grow inside and look, oh boy, I better do some
Yeah,
research.
right, right.
Yeah.
But
I,
my goal with that too is I would hope that the viewers too, right, in public spaces are going to feel that like that like biophilic urge of like, oh my gosh, this looks really cool. Let me get into this or let me learn about this.
yeah.
And so if we
Yeah.
can create those like little scenes for them to kind of hopefully inspire so that maybe they
Yeah.
might start their own plant journey as
And
well.
you'll definitely have to put some educational plaques and names of plants there and just
Yes.
say, oh, this is from, Peru and this is where they grow and this one's endangered or this one is, that would be cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm going to go back to the conservatory and find out what plants we have from Peru and be like, do you want this? Do you want part of that? Because now, but yeah, if you do need
Yeah,
anything,
right.
let me know. Um,
I love that. Thank you.
so where can I know you're a big hit on Instagram and it's at Arium Arium Botanicals, right? With the S
Mhm.
Botanicals.
Yes, you got it.
And do you have a TikTok?
We just started, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And because I usually forget about asking people about TikTok because I don't. And it's so what is it on TikTok?
It is. Oh, I'm going to pull that up for you
Oh,
really
okay.
quick just to make sure I got that right.
Okay.
I don't
It's-
use it enough to actually know right off the bat.
Yeah. But your website is ariumbotanicals.com, and you
Yes.
do ship some plants.
We do. Yeah. We're putting more of an emphasis this year to kind of like really try and bring our full experience to you.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, it's hard. I mean, if you either sort of have to dedicate almost only online or in person,
Exactly.
it's really hard to do both. So, but yeah, and you guys have beautiful pots. I know you have there. You have instructional videos. I know you go show how to repot things on your Instagram. What other social media?
Yeah.
What other social media do you guys have?
So I actually just found out our TikTok is
Okay.
Arium_Botanicals.
Okay.
So we're going to definitely use that platform to share more video content to kind of all different tutorials. But my personal favorite is to show different ones that you might not even know you can grow as a houseplant as well.
Yeah, that's fun too. I like seeing those. It's like, oh, you could grow. Yeah, you're right. You can grow that. Yeah, because
Right?
people are so used to especially people who are getting into it new. They go into the nursery outside section, they go in the inside section, and that's it.
Yeah.
But once you know the plant name, like you said, you could just start doing research and go, oh, I'm going to push the limits. I could grow that inside. So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, it's just all about learning, having fun, experimenting. You're going to fail along the way. There's so
Absolutely.
many houseplants out there.
We could do a whole nother podcast on just the weird houseplants.
I mean, we could do one just on Airoids. I would literally just have to sit back and like keep my mouth shut because it's like, I think we have that one at work. We got that. Wait a minute. That one's we have at work.
I've seen that one before.
Yeah, I've seen that before. Oh, I know that one. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, wait a minute. I water that one at work. Oh yeah, it's unlimited. So hopefully you'll be back on and we could do, we didn't even touch on begonias. We didn't even talk about
I know.
We didn't even
There's
talk about
so many good ones.
I know. We didn't even talk about Ripsalis. I mean, we just barely touched upon it. Ones that we're trying to get more people to
plant
like.
people.
Yeah.
Right? Two plant people got together. We spoke for an hour and a half without even fully getting into it.
I know. I just touched upon it. So I won't keep you any longer, but hopefully everyone enjoyed this, got something out of it. And until next time, everyone, happy gardening.